Yo, real talk. What if I told you that the strongest warrior in the universe, the dude who literally shakes dimensions when he powers up, is actually running from something way scarier than any villain? Like, for real, Goku's whole vibe, that goofy smile and endless appetite, might just be the most elaborate cover-up in anime history. We're not talking about dodging energy blast here, we're talking about dodging himself. See, here's the thing that's low-key disturbing when you really think about it: Goku never stops. Dude's always chasing the next fight, the next transformation, the next challenge. But why though? Most people would be like, oh, he just loves fighting, but nah, that's surface level. What if that constant need to push forward, to never sit still, is actually him running from the one opponent he can never beat? The silence inside his own head. That moment when there's no enemy to punch, no world to save, just him and his thoughts? That's the real final boss, and homie's been ducking that fight his entire life. Wild, right? Okay, before we dive deep into this rabbit hole, do me a solid real quick. Smash that subscribe button and hit the like, no cap. Here's why you absolutely cannot miss out on this. If we're already unpacking how Goku, literally the goat of anime, is running from his own mind, imagine what we're gonna discover about your other favorite characters. Like, this channel is basically therapy sessions for anime characters, and trust me, once you see these heroes and villains through this lens, you can never unsee it. It hits different, I promise. Plus, we're building a community of people who aren't afraid to go beyond the surface, who want to understand the real psychology behind these stories. So subscribe, leave that like, and let's keep this journey going together. You feel me? Alright, let's get back to it. So check it out, let's break down what's really happening with Goku on a psychological level, and I'm gonna keep it 100 with you. This gets pretty heavy. We gotta start by understanding what silence actually represents for someone like him. See, in psychology there's this concept called experiential avoidance. Basically, it's when someone constantly keeps themselves busy, distracted, or stimulated to avoid dealing with uncomfortable internal experiences. Thoughts, feelings, memories, all that stuff that makes you feel some type of way that you don't want to feel. And yo, if that doesn't describe Goku to a T, I don't know what does. Think about it from jump. Goku's entire life has been one traumatic event after another, but dude barely processes any of it. He got sent to Earth as a baby during a planetary genocide, hit his head and lost his Psyanime memories, his adoptive grandfather died, he's died multiple times himself, watched friends die, fought literal gods of destruction, and through all of it, what does he do? He smiles, eats, and looks for the next fight. There's never a moment where he's like, yo, let me sit with this for a second and actually feel what I'm feeling. Never. That's not normal, fam. That's avoidance dressed up as optimism. Here's where it gets really interesting from a psychological perspective. Goku's relationship with fighting isn't just about getting stronger or protecting people, it's way deeper than that. Fighting gives him a sense of identity, purpose, and most importantly, it fills the silence. When he's in battle, his mind is completely occupied. There's no space for introspection, no room for those dark thoughts to creep in, no chance for that existential dread to grab hold. It's like he's found the perfect drug, and that drug is combat. The rush, the adrenaline, the focus required, it's all consuming. And that's exactly what he needs it to be. But let's take it further. In California, we talk a lot about mindfulness and being present, right? Well, Goku is present, but only in very specific contexts. He's present when there's danger, when there's a challenge, when there's something external demanding his attention. But ask him to be present with himself, with his family during peacetime, with the quiet moments of just existing. And watch how quickly he finds an excuse to train or disappear. Chi-Chi been telling us this for years, but we thought it was just comedic relief. Nah, that's a man who cannot sit still with himself, and his wife knows it. The psychological term for this is action addiction, or workaholic tendencies. But in Goku's case, it's fight addiction. And addictions, no matter what they are, serve the same purpose. They're coping mechanisms. They help people avoid dealing with underlying pain, trauma, or emotional voids. So what's Goku avoiding? Well, probably a lot of things. There's the survivor's guilt from being one of the last Scions. There's the identity crisis of not fully belonging to Earth or to his Scion heritage. There's the weight of constantly being the one everyone relies on to save the day. There's the deaths he's witnessed and the deaths he's caused. There's the times he's failed. And beneath all of that, there might be something even more fundamental. A fear of his own capacity for destruction. See, Goku knows what he is. He's a Scion, a warrior race literally bred for conquest and destruction. Even though he grew up on Earth and developed a good heart, that primal nature is still in there. We've seen glimpses of it, especially when he goes Ultra Instinct or even back in the day with his Scion transformations. There's a part of him that enjoys the fight a little too much, that gets a thrill from pushing his limits, from that raw power coursing through him. And maybe, just maybe, that scares him. What if, in those quiet moments, he has to confront the possibility that he's not as different from Vegeta's old self or from the Scions who destroyed planets? What if the only thing separating him from being a monster is constant action, constant heroism, constant distraction? This psychological mirror reveals something we don't like to admit about heroes. They're human, or in his case, Scion, but still fallible. They carry weight. They carry doubt. They carry fear. But society needs heroes to be invincible, emotionally and physically, so they learn to perform invincibility. Goku's performance is his eternal optimism and his insatiable appetite for challenges. It's a mask that's so well worn it's become part of his face. But masks are meant to hide something, and what he's hiding is that same silence that devours everyone from the inside. The silence that asks, who am I when I'm not being what everyone needs me to be? Yo, and here's something that's gonna blow your mind. Goku's constant pursuit of strength, his need to surpass every limit, to unlock every new transformation. That's not just about protecting people anymore. At some point it became about proving something to himself. It's like he's trying to outrun his own humanity, or his own vulnerability. As long as he's getting stronger, as long as there's another level to reach, he doesn't have to face the fact that some things can't be solved with power. Some enemies can't be punched away. Internal struggles, emotional pain, existential questions. None of that submits to a Kamehameha. And I think on some level, Goku knows this, which is why he never stops moving. The moment he stops, the moment there's no enemy to fight, he has to fight himself, and that's the one fight he's not sure he can win. This psychological pattern shows up in how he parents too. Goku's not a bad father because he doesn't care, he's a bad father because he doesn't know how to exist in the mundane. He doesn't know how to be present for recitals, dinners, homework help, all those normal dad things. Those require him to slow down, to be emotionally available, to sit in the discomfort of everyday life. And that's his kryptonite. It's easier to save the world than to sit through dinner and actually connect with his family on an emotional level. That's real talk right there, and it's something a lot of people, not just Goku, struggle with. We live in a culture, especially here in Cali, where everything's go go go, where being busy is worn as a badge of honor. But sometimes being busy is just being scared of being still. Alright, so now we're gonna go even deeper, and this is where things get really uncomfortable because we're talking about what happens when that avoidance strategy starts to crack. Like, what happens when the walls Goku's built around himself start showing fractures? Because they do, fam. They absolutely do. And when they do, it's terrifying to witness, even if the show doesn't always frame it that way. Let's talk about the Tournament of Power for a second. On the surface, it's this epic battle royale with universe-level stakes, right? But psychologically, look at what's happening to Goku during this arc. He's literally the reason the tournament exists. His desire for a challenge, his need for that next fight, put every universe at risk of erasure. And when he finds out about the consequences, there's this brief moment where you can see something flicker across his face. Guilt, maybe? Fear. But then he doubles down. He pushes forward. He justifies it. Well, Zeno was gonna destroy the universes anyway, he says. Classic rationalization, classic defense mechanism. He can't sit with the weight of what his actions might cost, so he reframes it in a way that lets him keep moving forward without processing the gravity of it all. But here's what's wild. During that tournament, when he unlocks Ultra Instinct, we're watching a man literally transcend thought itself. Ultra Instinct is described as a state where the body moves without the mind interfering, where thought is abandoned completely. And yo, doesn't that sound like the ultimate form of avoidance? He's found a way to fight without even having to be mentally present. His body does everything while his consciousness can just not exist for a moment. It's like the final evolution of his coping mechanism. He doesn't just avoid thinking about his problems anymore. He's achieved a state where he doesn't have to think at all. That's simultaneously the most powerful thing he's ever done and the most psychologically concerning. Let's connect this to real-world psychology for a minute. There's this thing called dissociation, where people mentally disconnect from their thoughts, feelings, memories, or sense of identity as a way to cope with trauma or overwhelming stress. It's like your brain's emergency exit when things get too heavy. And while Ultra Instinct is obviously a fantasy power-up, metaphorically, it represents that same principle, complete disconnection from the self to achieve function. Goku has literally trained himself to not have to be present in his own consciousness. That's not strength, homie. That's survival mode disguised as power. Now let's talk about what happens during the rare moments when Goku's forced to confront himself. Remember when he met his father Bardock through those visions? Or when he learned about the truth of his heritage, about what Scions really were? There's this discomfort in him, this visible tension. He doesn't linger on it. He acknowledges it and moves on almost immediately. Same thing when Vegeta calls him out for being a bad father, or when Chi-Chi breaks down about him never being home. He gets this look, this almost childlike confusion mixed with avoidance, and then he changes the subject or finds a reason to leave. These are moments where the mirror is being held up to his face, and he can't stand looking at his own reflection for too long. The thing about internal collapse is that it doesn't always look dramatic. It's not always some big breakdown moment with tears and screaming. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's a pattern of behavior that keeps repeating. Sometimes it's the inability to form deep, meaningful connections because that requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires stillness, and stillness brings the silence, and the silence brings the thoughts he spent his whole life running from. Goku has friends, sure, but how many of them really know him? Like, actually know what he thinks about late at night when he can't sleep? What fears keep him up? What regrets he carries? Nobody knows that stuff because he never lets anyone in that deep. Hell, he probably doesn't even let himself in that deep. Here's something that's gonna hit different. Goku dies and comes back multiple times throughout the series, right? But think about what death represents psychologically. It's the ultimate unknown, the ultimate silence, the ultimate stillness. And every time Goku dies, what does he do? He trains in the afterlife. Even in death, he can't sit still. Even in the literal void between life and whatever comes next, he's finding ways to stay busy, to stay moving, to avoid just being. That's not normal acceptance of death, that's turning death into another training ground because he doesn't know how else to exist. And let's talk about his relationship with Vegeta for a second, because this is crucial. Vegeta is like his dark mirror in so many ways. Vegeta started off embracing that Saiyan pride, that warrior brutality, that destructive nature. But over time, Vegeta's done more internal work than Goku ever has. Vegeta's confronted his past, his sins, his failures. He's learned to be a family man, to show vulnerability, to admit when he's wrong. He's grown emotionally in ways that Goku simply hasn't. And I think that low-key threatens Goku, even if he doesn't consciously realize it. Because Vegeta's growth represents everything Goku's been avoiding: the hard internal work, the facing of uncomfortable truths, the sitting with your own darkness until you understand it. There's this psychological concept called shadow work that Carl Jung talked about. It's the idea that everyone has a shadow self, the parts of ourselves we reject, deny, or don't want to acknowledge. And true growth, true psychological health, comes from integrating that shadow, from accepting all parts of yourself, even the ugly parts. Vegeta's done that work. Goku hasn't. Goku's shadow is still shadow. It's still hidden. It's still something he powers up to overcome rather than something he sits down to understand. The internal collapse I'm talking about isn't some future event that's gonna happen. It's already happening, has been happening throughout the entire series. It's happening every time he chooses training over his family. It's happening every time he risks everything for a good fight. It's happening every time someone tries to have a real, deep conversation with him and he gives them that blank stare or that goofy laugh to deflect. It's happening in the accumulation of unprocessed trauma, unexamined motivations, and unacknowledged fear. The collapse is slow, it's constant, and it's invisible to most people because Goku's so good at keeping it together on the outside. But here's the scariest part, and I want you to really sit with this for a second. What happens when there are no more transformations to unlock? What happens when there are no more enemies to fight? What happens when Goku reaches a point where he's truly fought everyone and everything worth fighting, and he's forced to just exist? That's the real endgame scenario nobody's talking about. That's the point where all that avoidance catches up with him, where the silence he's been running from finally corners him, and there's nowhere left to go. That's the internal collapse in its final form. Not dramatic, not explosive, just a man sitting alone with decades of unprocessed everything, and no distraction left to save him from himself. And yo, this isn't just about Goku. This is about all of us, real talk. How many of us stay busy to avoid dealing with our stuff? How many of us fill our lives with noise, with work, with scrolling, with anything that keeps us from having to sit in silence with our own thoughts? Goku's just the extreme version of something incredibly human. He's what happens when you take that avoidance strategy and crank it up to universe-saving levels. But the principle is the same. We're all running from something. The question is, what happens when we run out of road? Yo, hold up real quick. Before we get to the final revelation, I gotta know, what are you thinking right now? Like, is this hitting you the same way it's hitting me? Drop a comment down below and let me know. Have you ever felt like Goku? Like you had to keep moving, keep grinding, keep staying busy because stopping felt too scary? Or maybe you know someone like that. Someone who just can't sit still with themselves? Tell me your story for real. I read every comment, and honestly, hearing your perspectives helps me create better content for y'all. Plus, we're building something special here, a community that's not afraid to look deeper, to question what we see, to understand the psychology behind what we love. And listen, don't bounce yet. I know we've gone deep, I know this has been heavy, but stick with me through the end because what's coming next is the part that ties everything together. We're about to talk about the point of no return, that moment where everything we've discussed becomes unavoidable. You don't want to miss this, trust me. It's the piece that makes everything click. So stay locked in, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and let's finish this journey together. You got this far, you gotta see how it ends. Let's go. Alright, so here's where everything we've been building comes crashing down into one undeniable truth. We've talked about the avoidance, we've talked about the internal collapse, but now we gotta talk about the point of no return. That moment or series of moments where Goku crosses a line he can't uncross. Where the consequences of running from himself become so real, so tangible, that even his superhuman ability to deflect can't save him anymore. Let me put you on to something that's gonna reframe everything. There's a specific moment in Dragon Ball Super that nobody really talks about in these terms, but it's absolutely critical. It's when Goku admits out loud that he doesn't actually fight to protect people. He fights because he loves fighting. He's honest about it with Hit, with Jiren, with multiple opponents. And yo, that confession is the point of no return. Because once you say something like that out loud, once you acknowledge that your primary motivation isn't heroism but personal satisfaction, you can't pretend anymore. The mask slips and everyone, including yourself, sees what's underneath. This is what psychologists call a moment of clarity, when the defense mechanisms fail and reality breaks through. But here's the twisted part. Goku doesn't change after these admissions. He doesn't sit with that revelation and do any internal work. He just keeps going, which means he's now consciously avoiding rather than unconsciously avoiding. He knows what he's doing and he's choosing to keep doing it anyway. That's so much heavier than just being in denial. That's active rejection of self-awareness. That's looking in the mirror, seeing the cracks, and deliberately choosing to look away. Let's break down what this means for his relationships, because this is where the point of no return really manifests. Chi-Chi has basically given up on him being a present husband. She's resigned to it. That's not a joke anymore, that's tragedy. His sons have had to build their identities around his absence. Gohan literally had to choose between being like his father or being his own person, and he chose himself. He chose the scholar path, the family man path, specifically because he saw what his father's path cost. And Goten? Man, Goten barely knows Goku. He grew up with his dad being this legend everyone talked about, but not a real presence in his life. These aren't temporary consequences. These are permanent scars on relationships that can never fully heal, no matter how many times Goku saves the universe. Here's something that's gonna make you uncomfortable. Goku has become what he fights against. Not in the obvious turning evil way, but in a more subtle, more insidious way. He's become selfish. Villains in Dragon Ball are selfish. They want power, they want control, they want to impose their will on others. And while Goku's selfishness looks different, it's still selfishness. He prioritizes his desire to fight over the safety of universes. He prioritizes his training over his family's needs. He prioritizes his personal growth over being emotionally available to the people who love him. The point of no return is when you realize the hero and the villain are using the same playbook, just with different aesthetics. Now let's talk about what this does to him internally, because this is where it gets really dark. There's a psychological phenomenon called moral injury. It's when someone's actions violate their own moral code or sense of identity, and it creates this deep psychological wound. Soldiers experience this. Doctors experience this. And I'd argue Goku experiences this too, even if the show doesn't frame it that way. Every time he chooses fighting over family, every time his desire for a challenge puts others at risk, every time he's confronted with the consequences of his actions and has to rationalize them away, that's moral injury stacking up. And moral injury doesn't just disappear because you're strong or because you win the fight. It accumulates. It festers. It changes who you are at a fundamental level. The point of no return isn't a single moment, it's a threshold. And Goku crossed that threshold somewhere between the Cell games and now. Maybe it was when he chose to stay dead after the Cell fight, leaving his family behind because he thought Earth would be safer without him. A decision that looks noble on the surface but is actually him running away from having to be a father and husband during peacetime. Maybe it was when he recruited Hit to assassinate him because he was bored and wanted a challenge. Maybe it was when he initiated the Tournament of Power. Or maybe it happened earlier in small moments we didn't pay attention to. But whenever it happened, it happened. And once you cross that threshold, once you've prioritized your own needs over everything else enough times, it becomes your default setting. It becomes who you are. Here's the revelation that's gonna stick with you. Goku is trapped. Not by a villain, not by fate, but by himself. He's built a prison out of his coping mechanisms, out of his avoidance strategies, out of his need to keep moving. And the bars of that prison are invisible to him because they're made of the very things that make him feel alive: fighting, training, pushing limits. He can't see that he's trapped because the trap feels like freedom. That's the cruelest part. He thinks he's living his best life, chasing his passion, being true to himself. But really he's just running the same loop over and over, never growing emotionally, never healing, never truly living. He's stuck in a pattern that guarantees he'll never have to face the silence, but it also guarantees he'll never find peace. And this connects to something really important about trauma and how it works. Trauma doesn't just affect you in the moment it happens. Trauma rewires your brain, changes how you perceive threats, alters your coping mechanisms, and influences your decisions for years, sometimes forever. Goku's experienced enough trauma to break 1,000 people. Planetary destruction, multiple deaths, watching friends die, the weight of being everyone's savior. That stuff doesn't just bounce off you because you're strong. It shapes you. And when you don't process it, when you don't deal with it, it doesn't go away. It just goes underground. It becomes the foundation of who you are, operating in the background, influencing everything you do without you even realizing it. The point of no return is when that foundation has been set for so long, is so solidified, that changing it would require tearing down your entire sense of self and rebuilding from scratch. And that's terrifying. That's more terrifying than any villain. Because at least with a villain you know what you're fighting. At least with an external enemy you can see them, target them, defeat them. But how do you fight against the very structure of your own identity? How do you defeat coping mechanisms that have kept you alive, kept you functional, kept you sane for decades? You can't just Kamehameha your way out of that. There's no transformation that fixes it. That requires sitting in the silence, feeling the feelings, processing the trauma, doing the internal work. And that's the one thing Goku has never been willing to do. Let me bring this back to something relatable. In California, we got this culture of toxic positivity sometimes, right? Where everyone's supposed to be living their best life, chasing their dreams, staying positive no matter what. And that's cool, that's great, but sometimes it becomes a trap. Sometimes it becomes another way to avoid dealing with real pain, real problems, real emotional needs. Just keep hustling, just keep grinding, just stay positive. But what if you're running on empty? What if that positivity is just a mask for exhaustion, for unprocessed grief, for deep-seated fear? Goku is the ultimate version of that. He's always smiling, always ready for the next challenge, always positive. But underneath? Man, underneath there's decades of stuff he's never dealt with. The revelation here, the real gut-punch truth, is that strength isn't just about how hard you can hit or how much damage you can take. Real strength is being able to sit with yourself, to face your darkness, to acknowledge your wounds and do the work to heal them. And by that measure, Goku isn't strong at all. He's fragile. He's so fragile that he can't afford to stop moving for even a second, because if he does, everything he's been holding back might come crashing down. The strongest warrior in the universe is psychologically one of the weakest, and that's the tragedy nobody wants to talk about. So what happens now? What happens when someone's at this point of no return, when they've built their entire existence around avoidance, when they've crossed the threshold into conscious self-destruction disguised as heroism? Honestly, there are only two options. Either something happens that forces a complete breakdown and reconstruction of the self, some event so catastrophic that all the walls come down and there's no choice but to face everything at once. Or, and this is more likely for someone like Goku, nothing changes. He just keeps going, keeps fighting, keeps running until the end. Until there's literally nothing left to fight, and even then he'll probably find something. Because the alternative, the silence, the stillness, the facing of himself, is too terrifying to even consider. And that's where we are right now. That's the point of no return. Goku's locked into a pattern he can't escape, built a life he can't step away from, and created an identity he can't let go of without losing himself completely. The terror that even the strongest hide isn't fear of death, isn't fear of failure, isn't even fear of not being strong enough. It's fear of silence, fear of stillness, fear of having to exist without distraction, without purpose, without something external to define you. And that fear has already won. It won a long time ago. Goku just hasn't stopped moving long enough to realize it. So here we are, at the end of this deep dive, but real talk? This isn't really an ending. Because the thing about cicatrices, about scars that don't close, is that they re-reminders of wounds that shaped you, changed you, became part of your story. And Goku's scar, that silence he's been running from, that terror lurking in every quiet moment, it's not closing. It's not healing. It's just there. Always there. Waiting. Let me paint you a picture of what Goku's future looks like if nothing changes. Imagine him at the end of everything. All the threats are gone. All the villains defeated. No more tournaments, no more universe-ending catastrophes, no more excuses to fight. He's sitting at home, surrounded by family, Chi-Chi, his sons, his granddaughter Pan, maybe more grandkids by then. Everyone's happy, everyone's safe. And he should be content, right? Mission accomplished. Universe saved. Family protected. But instead, there's this look in his eyes. This restlessness. This quiet desperation that nobody else can quite name but everyone can feel. He's physically present but emotionally absent, looking out the window like he's waiting for something, anything, to give him a reason to leave again. That's the scar that doesn't close. It's not dramatic. It's not this big explosive moment. It's just emptiness. A void where peace should be. A man who's saved everyone and everything except himself. And now that there's nothing left to save, he doesn't know who he is anymore. That's the real horror of Goku's psychology. Not that he might lose a fight someday, but that he might win all of them and still lose himself in the process. But let's zoom out for a second and talk about why this matters beyond just one character. Because Goku represents something bigger, something that hits way closer to home than we might want to admit. He represents all of us who use work, hobbies, social media, relationships, substances, whatever, to avoid sitting with ourselves. He's the extreme version of a very common human condition. We live in a world that celebrates hustle culture, that tells us to always be grinding, always be moving, always be productive. And that's dope when it's healthy, but when it becomes a compulsion, when it becomes the only way you know how to exist, that's when it becomes Goku's trap. The scar that doesn't close is the collective wound we all carry from living in a society that doesn't value stillness, doesn't honor rest, doesn't create space for genuine self-reflection. We're all running from our own versions of silence. Some of us run into our careers. Some into relationships. Some into social media, binge-watching shows, playing games for hours. Anything to keep the noise going so we don't have to hear our own thoughts. And just like Goku, we tell ourselves we're fine. We're productive. We're living our best lives. But are we really? Or are we just really good at avoiding? Here's something that's gonna stick with you. Goku will never have a moment where he sits down and says, "I need therapy," or "I need to work on myself." That's not who he is, and more importantly, that's not the world he lives in. Dragon Ball doesn't have therapy. It doesn't have mental health awareness. It has training, fighting, and overcoming external threats. So Goku's scar will never get the treatment it needs because his universe doesn't even have the language to describe what he's going through. And man, doesn't that feel familiar? How many people in the real world are walking around with psychological wounds they don't have the language for, living in environments that don't validate mental health struggles, surrounded by people who think, "Just stay positive," or "Just work harder," is legitimate advice for deep-seated trauma. The cicatrice that doesn't close is also in his relationships, permanently marked by his absence. Chi-Chi will always carry the pain of being married to someone who chose everything else over her. Gohan will always have that complicated relationship with his father. Love mixed with resentment, admiration mixed with disappointment. Goten will always wonder what it would have been like to actually grow up with his dad around. These aren't things that get fixed with one good conversation or one family dinner. These are fundamental relationship dynamics that have been set, that have calcified over years, that have become the normal. The scar is in the space between what could have been and what actually was. And here's the part that's really gonna mess with you. Goku probably doesn't even fully register the damage. Like, on some level he knows he's not the best husband or father, but he doesn't really get it. He doesn't sit with how much his choices have hurt the people around him because, again, that would require the stillness and introspection he's been avoiding his whole life. So the scar exists, it's visible to everyone else, but he's not looking at it. He's looking at the next challenge, the next transformation, the next distraction. The wound is there, but the person who needs to heal it most isn't even acknowledging it exists. Let's talk about legacy for a minute because this is important. What's Goku's real legacy? On paper, it's incredible, savior of Earth multiple times over. Protector of the universe. The strongest warrior ever. Inspiration to countless fighters. But what about his personal legacy? What about the legacy he leaves with his family, with the people who actually knew him beyond the hero persona? That legacy is way more complicated. It's a legacy of absence, of priorities that put everyone else second, of love that was always conditional on whether he was needed for a fight. And that's the scar that'll outlive him. The complicated, messy, painful reality of who he actually was versus who everyone needed him to be. You know what's wild? In a way, Goku's greatest enemy isn't Frieza, isn't Cell, isn't Bu or Jiren or any of those cats. His greatest enemy is time. Because time is the one thing that forces stillness. Time is what makes you old, what slows you down, what eventually makes you unable to fight even if you want to. And when that time comes, when Goku physically can't keep running anymore, what then? That's the ultimate confrontation he can't avoid. The moment when his body gives out and all that's left is his mind, his memories, his unprocessed everything. That's the final boss fight, and it's not one you can power up to overcome. But here's the thing that I need you to understand, and this is crucial. This doesn't have to be your story. Goku's fictional, right? He's a character in a show. But the psychology is real. The patterns are real. The consequences are real. And unlike Goku, you have options he doesn't have. You can choose to stop running. You can choose to sit in the silence and see what comes up. You can choose to do the internal work, to face your trauma, to heal your wounds instead of just covering them up with constant motion. You have access to therapy, to support groups, to resources that can help you understand yourself better. You live in a world that's slowly starting to recognize that mental health matters, that emotional wellness is just as important as physical strength. The scar doesn't have to stay open forever. It can heal. It won't disappear, scars don't disappear, but it can heal into something that doesn't hurt anymore, something that's just part of your story instead of something that controls your story. And that's the difference between Goku's path and the path available to you. He's stuck in his narrative. You're not stuck in yours. So what's the takeaway here? What's the lesson from watching one of anime's greatest heroes slowly crumble under the weight of unprocessed trauma and perpetual avoidance? It's this: strength without self-awareness is just performance. Power without purpose is just distraction. And constant motion without introspection is just a really elaborate way of standing still. Goku's been standing still his whole life, he just moves so fast that nobody notices. Don't be like that. Don't let the fear of silence control you. Don't let the terror of facing yourself keep you from actually living. The silence isn't the enemy. The silence is where the answers are. The silence is where healing happens. The silence is where you actually meet yourself, not the version of you that performs for others, but the real you, flaws, wounds, fears, and all. And yeah, that's scary. That's terrifying actually. But it's also necessary. It's also beautiful. It's also the only way to truly be free. Goku's story isn't over and his scar isn't closing. But your story? That's still being written. And you get to decide whether your scars heal or whether they keep bleeding. You get to decide whether you keep running or whether you finally stop and face what you've been avoiding. That's your power. That's your choice. And that's something even Goku, with all his transformations and techniques, doesn't have. Yo, but listen, we just scratched the surface here, for real for real. If this deep dive into Goku's psychology blew your mind, wait till you see what we uncover about other characters. Like, we're talking Vegeta's redemption arc and what it reveals about masculinity and vulnerability. We're talking Naruto's obsession with acknowledgement and how childhood trauma shapes your entire identity. We're talking Light Yagami's God complex and the psychology of power corruption. Every single video on this channel goes this deep, pulls back these layers, shows you the psychology hiding in plain sight in your favorite anime. This isn't just entertainment, fam. This is understanding yourself better through the characters you love. This is learning about psychology, about trauma, about human behavior through stories that already mean something to you. And the community we're building here? It's full of people just like you who aren't satisfied with surface-level analysis, who want to go deeper, who want to understand the why behind everything. So here's what you gotta do right now. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, because trust me, you don't want to miss the next video. We're dropping constant heat, constant insights, constant perspective shifts that'll change how you watch anime forever. Check out the video I'm gonna link right here. It's about outro video du canal, and it's gonna hit just as hard as this one did, maybe even harder. The rabbit hole goes way deeper than you think, and I'm here to guide you through all of it. Don't let this be the end of your journey. Let this be the beginning. Let's keep exploring together, keep learning together, keep growing together. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is really about: growth. Understanding these characters helps us understand ourselves, and understanding ourselves is how we actually heal those scars instead of just running from them like Goku does. So what are you waiting for? Click that next video. Join this community. Let's dive deeper together. I'll see you there, fam. Peace.